Handout, we're looking at 1 Timothy chapters 5 and 6 tonight. That's going to be the focus of our study. 1 Timothy chapters 5 and 6. Going to finish this book up, Lord willing, next week. Move into 2 Timothy. Appreciate Danny filling in for me. I think, was that you that filled in, Danny?
Yes, sir.
Okay, appreciate him doing that for me last week. He's gone in a meeting and he said, you guys covered 380, so that's good for me. Hopefully he answered all the questions about qualifications of elders. So, do you have any of those coming up? No? He must have done all the talking then. We'll get into that when we look at Titus a little bit. We'll have another opportunity to talk about some of those things. So, question number 1 on your handout. Of course, we usually start with a discussion question, open it up, try to wake everybody up at least and get a little bit of a discussion going here. But it deals with part of what we're going to be looking at tonight. And that question is this: do you think that most people are or aren't content with what they have? What would you say the general public?
I would say no. I would say no.
No? I would say that's pretty safe to say. Most people aren't going to be content with what they have in life, right? And so the second part of that question is, why is that the case? I mean, we live in America, right? We live in one of the most blessed parts of this world that a person could live in. We have money, we have food, we have possessions. So why aren't we happy?
Everybody wants more.
Everybody wants more, right? Can you ever have enough money? Can you ever have enough possessions? Well, it depends, doesn't it? It depends.
You know, I don't think that's necessarily just the nature of man, but I think it's our culture that we grow up in. We get exposed to that as children all the way up. That's our culture.
Yeah.
And not all of that's bad. That's what built this country, is the ambition of people to improve themselves. But it can go too far, too.
Yeah. Yeah. And the problem with trying to find contentment in physical things is what? Doesn't work. You can never have enough, can't you? You can never have enough where somebody says, well, I'm full, I'm satisfied, I'm content. If we're trying to find contentment in physical things, we're always going to be looking for more and more and more. That's just the nature of the world that we live in and the things that are present here upon this earth. Paul, of course, talks about contentment later on in this chapter, well, in chapter 6, I guess. But, contentment is something that can only be found in the only way a person can have a fulfilled and meaningful life and be fully satisfied. Bible tells us the answer to that is doing what we were created to be, what we were created for. And if we fulfill our God-given, our divine purpose, then we can find contentment, can't we? Regardless of what the physical things are here around us. But again, it's just the nature of man. You can see over and over again, never satisfied, never content, never full with physical things. So Paul, hopefully we'll have time to talk about that a little bit more. But let's start here in chapter 5. And Paul just kind of generally starts out with some information about widows. Also talks about elders, and then a little bit about slaves in the first part of chapter 6. We're not going to deal with the slaves. We kind of dealt with that in Ephesians and Colossians, but we're going to talk a little bit about widows and elders. He starts out with kind of a general idea of how we should treat one another, and he talks about kind of different classifications within the church, for lack of a better term. But he talks about older men, then he talks about younger men. He also talks about older women and younger women. And basically, how are we supposed to treat one another, regardless of what gender or what age we are? How could you sum that up? Yeah, we're supposed to be brothers and sisters, right? He talks about, treating older men as your father, treating older women as your mother, treating your younger men in Christ as your brothers, your younger sisters in Christ as your sister. So you have a principle that there's supposed to be mutual honor and respect for one another. Now, kind of think about it in this way. Maybe we can pick on each other a little bit and not get too carried away. But I'm going to group myself in the older class, okay? I feel like I'm an older individual, but what are the pros and cons of being older?
Maturity.
Okay, maturity. Probably to me, one of the greatest pros of being around older people are the fact that they have experience. And with experience, you usually gain what?
You get smarter.
Wisdom, right. Knowledge and wisdom. That's true. Yeah, it's true. But generally, being around people who have lived longer than you have, who dealt with more things than you have, that's generally a positive experience, isn't it? Because they can give you good advice, sound advice, and help you out in difficult situations. So there are pros that are associated with being older. Are there any cons? Okay, let me clarify this, okay? Are there any cons of being around older people or dealing with older people? What would you say some of those would be?
Same talk about
What? Did he say something over there? Okay, well, that wasn't quite where I was wanting to go with it. But, would you say that as we get older that we're more open or more closed-minded? Yeah, we're pretty stubborn. I mean, we get set in our ways, and we have ways that we like to do things or see things done, and we don't want them done any other way. And can that be a problem in the church? Can it? It can lead to problems. But generally speaking, the older you get, the more opposed you are to new ideas and new methods or new ways of doing things. So there's positive things when you're dealing with older people. There's negative things too. What about younger people? What are the pros for younger people?
They think they do anything.
Okay. And they can do a lot, can't they? I mean, one of the benefits of youth is, of course, energy and ability. Young people are very talented individuals, and generally they're willing to use their talents and their abilities in about any way they can to help. So that's something positive. What about, let's do something negative. What's something negative about dealing with younger people?
Their mouth.
Yeah, okay. Generally speaking, when you're younger, you think you know everything, don't you? You think you're the smartest person alive, and everybody else doesn't know much, and you have all the answers. And so, those again, that's what Paul's talking about here. In the church, we're going to have to deal with one another. We're going to have to interact with one another. We're going to have older people. We're going to have younger people, and we just have to learn to. We have to learn to dwell on the positives and not focus so much on the negatives, and treat each other with honor and respect. Because, all of us have abilities and usefulness within the Lord's church, and it's up to us to make sure that we interact with one another in a positive way. So that's kind of how Paul begins this chapter here. Then he talks a little bit about the idea of widows, and generally I think he kind of discusses, what is a family's responsibility toward widows within that family unit. What is our personal responsibility as an individual Christian toward widows, and then what's the church's responsibility? So talk to us a little bit about this, but question number 3 here on your handout is this: what should the children and grandchildren of a widow do? What should they do according there to chapter 5 and verse 4?
Take care of the children and the grandchildren should take care of the widow.
Yeah.
Whatever's needed.
Yeah, if you have a widow within your family unit, you're a child or a grandchild, we should take it upon ourselves to take care of that individual, shouldn't we? And you know, the Bible, of course, has a lot to say about caring for and helping the needy and caring for those who can't take care of themselves. That's true all across the board in humanity and mankind, but it's really reflected first at home, isn't it? And so the first responsibility that we have is toward our own family unit. And so Paul just simply talks about the idea that it's the responsibility of children and grandchildren to take care of that widow. Now, he describes it. Well, why does he say to do that? First of all, he gives a reason why. Repay. Yeah. What did they do for us when we were younger, when we were children? They took care of us, didn't they? Saw that we got something to eat, gave us a place to stay. You know, we need clothes washed. They washed our clothes for us, stuff like that. So Paul says, now it's your turn to repay. You get a chance to. They took care of you when you were younger. Now you get a chance to repay them and take care of them in their time of need. And so we have a responsibility toward our family as Christians. Where we could go a lot of places with this, but thought it might be beneficial to just talk about some modern day application. Where in your mind does a nursing home fit into this picture? That's pretty relevant today in our society. They didn't have nursing homes back then. They didn't have places like that where, you know, they could care for people around the clock. But where does that fit into the picture? Or how do you see that as a Christian?
You just can't take care of their brother at home. They need more medical care. Then you have an option to put them somewhere that can receive.
Yeah, there's some situations that you get into in life where, you know, they're going to require 24/7 supervision and care. And if you're going to work and hold down a job, it's just not possible to do that, is it? Now, are you still taking care of them? Yeah, you're seeing that their needs are supplied. The only thing I think I would be against as a Christian is sometimes you see people, older people, get put into a nursing home and just forgotten about. And that's not the way that we're supposed to do it. But you know, even children. When you raise children at home, how many people ever took your child to a babysitter? Okay, were you irresponsible as a parent by doing that? No, you were still seeing to their need. You were seeing they were taken care of. But there's just certain situations in time where you can't devote 24/7 care. And I think that's relevant in our society. And again, the thing that I'd be against is just kind of like some people get put in there and just forgotten about. That wouldn't be a Christian thing to do. But certainly has a place within our society today. So he talks a little bit about when the church should start taking care of widows here. And question number 4 on your handout is that when is it the church's responsibility to take care of a widow?
Well, that verse says, whenever it's 360 in order without any of the additional support of family.
Okay, yeah. You first have to start with the idea. It needs to be a widow indeed, and by that simply means no family to take care of her, no estate that she's inherited. Now, understand back then is a lot different than our world today. Women didn't have a lot of rights back then. They didn't get a lot of inheritance like today in our world. So just a different atmosphere. But you know, if you didn't have a family, if your husband died and you didn't have a family and you didn't get any kind of inheritance, how are you going to take care of yourself? Be pretty difficult. In fact, that's one of the things I think that Paul says there in verse 5. He says, "Now she who is really a widow and left alone and trusts in God and continues in supplications and prayers night and day." So she's got nobody else. The only person she got to rely on is who? She's praying day and night to God that she can make it through and survive. And so that's a widow indeed. And then the church has an obligation and a responsibility to help that person, as you would any person in need, to reach out to them. And really, the idea is to fully support her, isn't it? I mean, to take care of her, make sure all of her needs are provided, and she gets the care, whatever care that is that she needs. So there are some things that you have to consider, not just anybody and everybody. I'm not going to go into the specifics of it. If you want to talk about it a little, I guess we can try, but I just kind of generalize the categories here. Age is one of the things that you have to consider, isn't it? Also, her marriage record, that has to be under consideration. And then her past works, what has she done in the past? And it's not that, I think the point that Paul's kind of driving at here is you don't want to just support any lifestyle. If you're going to support somebody, you want to make sure that the support that you're giving them is going in a positive direction and doing positive things. And again, not just enabling people and letting them live any type of lifestyle that they want to live and saying, that's okay with us. Here's what you need. But there's some things that we have to consider that go into the consideration of the support of those widows. Anybody got any comments or thoughts on that? Like I said, it's kind of you could chase that rabbit all night if we wanted to, but he talks about younger widows, of course, are not in that category. Question number 5, why should younger widows not be taken care of by the church?
I think at that time, because a lot of times the younger widows were getting married multiple times.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the reason.
And generally, if you're a younger person, are you going to get remarried? Odds are pretty good you're going to get remarried, aren't they? Now, as we grow older, and we aren't what we once used to be, and don't need so many things in life, we might say, hey, I've done this once. Once was enough for me. I don't need to do it again. But generally speaking, if you're a younger individual, you're going to end up getting remarried. And so Paul didn't want the church, again, enabling this kind of lifestyle where a younger woman has opportunities that are laying before her and she not take advantage of them because the church is taking care of all her needs. And so that's part of the reason that he talks about there. The other one was, and this is just a general principle, I know Paul applies it of widows here, but it's not just a principle that's true of women. But what happens if you got a lot of idle time on your hands? What do? You usually get into trouble, don't you?
Verse 13.
Yeah, you usually get into trouble. And so it's better to stay busy. And if you're supporting these younger women here and they don't have anything to do during the day, he said they're going to start getting involved in stuff they have no business being involved in. Go ahead, brother. You got a question?
Well, let's go back to the over 60 that the church is supposed to take care of. How involved is it for the church to take care of them with it? Are they supposed to supply food and clothing, or are they supposed to take them to their house?
I would say whatever she needs to survive, wouldn't you? I mean, the administration, well, I wish I had more time to talk about it, or look at it, but remember in Acts chapter 6, the church of Jerusalem, part of their daily service was ministering to widows. And it was a great need in that day and age. In our society today, is the need the same? I don't think so. I mean, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I do not know a widow who is a widow indeed. Does anybody else? I mean, a widow who has no family, who has no inheritance, no way of taking care of themselves. Not a whole lot that happens in our world today. But I would say, again, whatever the necessities are of life, that's whatever she needs to survive and be taken care of, that's what we should do. At least that's the same impression of children and grandchildren caring for them.
I think that's true here in the United States, but other parts of the world, that's not.
Yeah.
like in Central America, they're poor there.
Yeah.
And if there's a widow, and they don't necessarily have family around, so I think there probably are widows indeed down there.
Yeah.
Not around here.
Well, like I said, our nation is so blessed. I mean, we got so many physical blessings and just, I mean, really don't lack anything. That it would be a very rare situation around here. But if it were present, again, that would be our responsibility. I bring up Acts chapter 6 because it mentions there the daily ministration. So they were doing something every day in caring for these women. I would say at least part of it was giving them food, giving them something to eat for the day. But certainly played a major role in the first century church. But the younger widows, again, they weren't to be taken in by the church because of, coming up with idle time on your hands is not going to lead to a good situation. So they're going to have opportunities to remarry. They can take advantage of that, raise children, be part of a home. So he talks about widows there. He also talks about elders. We're not going to go into great detail, but I know I bring this up from time to time. Just bring it up because this is what the Bible teaches. But question number 6 is this: should elders be paid? What does chapter 5 and verse 18 say about that? Or actually 17 and 18.
Yes.
Yeah. Why?
They're doing the Lord's work.
They're working, right? The principle that Paul lays down here is if you're doing labor, if you're doing work, does a guy who's laboring expect to be paid? And how many of us go to work and don't expect to be paid? Anybody work for free? You might feel like you work for free, but probably in reality we don't, right? And it's no different in the Lord's church either. He also talks about those who labor in the word and doctrine. Evidently, probably in the first century church, I would say the majority of the teaching and preaching was done by elders over the local congregation. Now you read about Paul going to these congregations, Timothy, evangelism, things like that. But I would say the majority of it was done by the eldership. And Paul says, make sure they're getting double pay. They're doing 2 jobs, not 1. So pay them like they're working 2, not like they're working 1. And of course, the example that he used there is when they harvested the grain, they had these animals going through the grain, pulling a sickle and cutting this grain. They didn't put a muzzle on the animal and say, now you can't eat any of this grain. If he was working and helping bring in this grain, then he got to eat it. And that's one of the biblical principles that's laid down too. Again, can an elder choose not to be paid? Well, yeah. I mean, that's their right. That's their privilege. Preacher can do the same thing. But certainly the Bible teaches that they deserve to be paid. Question number 7 here, real quickly, verse 23, Paul talks about Timothy, or he encouraged Timothy to use a little bit of wine. Why did he do that?
It was actually a prescription of medicine, if you look at it like that. And besides that, they had a lot of bad water, I think.
Yeah, that certainly would have been the case in that day and age. Drinking water wouldn't have been like we have today. But the main thing that he mentions there, as Danny pointed out, prescription use, right? Not social drinking, not enjoying a beer with the fellows or something like that. But he said you do it for your stomach's sake and your often infirmities. So wine in that day and age, alcohol still is today. It's useful. I mean, it's useful in medicinal ways, just like about every other drug we have. It can be abused, but it's useful in medicinal ways. And is it wrong to use it in that way?
No.
Well, what did Paul say? Did he say you can't use it or don't use it? No, he said go ahead and use it, right? But how much? A little bit. He said don't overdo it, right? Use just what you need. Use a little bit. And I think it's important to point out what does the fact that Paul had to tell Timothy that indicate to you?
That Timothy was under stress.
Okay, well, that would be a good observation. Yeah, I didn't think of it that way. But what I was thinking about is, I think Timothy had it in his mind, don't use it. Don't you? And Paul's pointing out here, it's not wrong if you use it the right way. You know, you can use it, and Paul said, in fact, I advise you to use it, you know. It'd help you out, be beneficial to you. Now, there's some things that we could probably talk about and mention tonight. One of them that I'd just say briefly here, if you are a person in the past who's been addicted to alcohol or a recovering addict, I wouldn't advise it. Wouldn't advise it in any way. I just think it's smart that you find a different way or a different alternative. Am I going to say you sin if you do it? No, I'm not. But again, I don't think it would be a smart thing just because of some of the past history and the struggles that people have with it. But it is authorized by the Bible for that purpose. He talks about the love of money here. We're going to have to get going. The love of money, of course, attitude that's prevalent in our world today. Some false teachers in Paul's day, they were preaching for what reason? Money, financial gain, right? What should be our motive in teaching God's word, in religion in general? Save souls, right? That's why we study. You know, that's why we read God's word. Number one, we want to know the truth. We want to go to heaven. But number two, we want to help other people get there too. And that should be our motive for why we teach what we teach and why we practice what we do. Unfortunately, there are some people who are so motivated by greed that they will intentionally teach error because it brings them financial gain. Think about a person that's so motivated by love for money that they are willing to intentionally lead somebody astray, know what they're telling them is not true, but go ahead and teach them that anyway. That's a pretty greedy person, isn't it? But that's the power of the love of money. It motivates people to do a lot of foolish and hurtful things, as Paul talks about here. That was true in Paul's day. Do you think it's true today? Yeah, unfortunately. That doesn't mean that everybody who teaches error is financially motivated or in love with money. But there are some, aren't there? There are some. A lot of commercialized religion today, isn't there? Because there's a lot of money in it. And that's how some people view religion. It's a way to bring gain or money to them. What is it, though? Question 9 here. What is it that brings us great gain? What is it that makes us rich?
Godliness with contentment.
Yeah, contentment, being fulfilled, satisfied, complete. And the only way that we can get that to that state is through living godly. That's what being truly rich is. Living a godly life. And that teaches us to be content, to be satisfied. Think about, again, how many people here are, just restless and feel empty as they're living here upon this earth. I can't imagine going through life without having a sense of fulfillment and completeness. Can you? I mean, that would be a miserable life to live. But there's a lot of people who are living that life. They're trying to be fulfilled with money, love of money, what they're looking for. But again, that's not going to bring us true contentment. Godliness is only going to accomplish that. So thinking about, Paul has a way of kind of boiling things down to their simplest point. Well, what did we bring into this world? What were you born with? Not a thing, right? What are we going to take with us when we leave? Not one thing. So what do we need?
Salvation.
Need salvation? And really all you need is something to get you from your birth to your death, right? You know what that is? Food, shelter, and clothing. That's what you need. Because anything else isn't going with it. We weren't born with it, and we're not going to take it away with us. So those are the things that we should learn to be content with, whatever we have. talks about the love of money being the roots of all kinds of evil. Of course, we talked a little bit about that. People do for money? Well, anything and everything. They'll hurt themselves. They'll do destructive and mean things to other people if it'll bring them financial gain. Just all kinds of miserable and wicked situations that are caused by the love of money. Is money evil? No. Money in and of itself is not evil, right? But when a person is motivated, driven by money, their love for money, that's what causes us to do evil things. So we have a responsibility as Christians to find contentment with living a godly life and enjoying the things that we've been blessed with here. Again, we're not going to take anything with us, so no need to worry about what all we have here upon this earth. Paul ends with a charge to Timothy. He talks about the good confession. What is the good confession? Question 12 on your handout here. What was he telling there in verse 11? I guess it's 12. He said, "You have confessed the good confession in the presence of many witnesses." What does that mean?
Jesus Christ is the Son of God.
Okay. That's what some people believe. That's the application of it. Certainly that's something we have to do, right? Everybody agree with that? Have to confess the name of Christ before men. What's to me, if you look at verse 13, he talks about there how Christ witnessed the good confession before Pontius Pilate. How would you kind of tie those two things together? What did Jesus do before Pontius Pilate? Yeah. Well, he said very, very little, didn't he? Yeah. Until Pilate, pushed him and made him say something, right? And remember, Pilate he kind of threatened him, didn't he? He said, "Don't you know I have the power to put you to death if I wanted to?" But as you read Jesus' interaction with Pilate, I think the point that's being made here is the good confession is, I think there's two ways that we profess the good confession. The first one's with our mouth, obviously. We speak the truth no matter what. Even if you're threatened with death, you speak the truth. Don't depart from it. The second way is in the way that we live. Our lifestyle shows what we believe and what we confess to be or profess to be. And so that shouldn't change regardless of what situation we find ourselves in or who we find ourselves standing before. Did Jesus change who he was as he stood before Pilate? Didn't change a thing about it, did he? And that's what we got to do too.
So would you say that he was basically saying that his life up to that point was all confession?
Yeah, I think so, don't you? Yeah. Timothy was a pretty amazing young individual, and one thing that stands out about him is people knew about him, and they respected him and they admired him for the type of person he was. And so his lifestyle was one that was well known in the first century. It talks about those who are rich not being arrogant or putting their hope in their wealth. What commandment, question 15 here, does he give to those who are rich? It says, don't be arrogant, don't put your hope in wealth, but do what? Do good things with your money. Do good things with your wealth, and be quick to share it with other people.
The more blessings you have money, the more your responsibility is to share.
Yeah, the more generous we should be, right? Is that generally the case how we operate? As Christians, yes, but I would say the more money people have in the world, usually the stingier they are, in my experience. So, all right, appreciate all the questions, comments, discussion. Anybody got anything before we end?